Well, hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football, and this is the Sports Page with Bob Case. And today we have a special guest, a friend of Bob's for many years. He's not only an author and a historian and an accomplished entrepreneur, guy that started his own business, but had his hands in so many different aspects. You're going to find this fascinating today. Marty Appel, is a guy. He's a New Yorker, worked for the New York Yankees. Was a part of the World Team Tennis organization that was there in New York and worked for Topps baseball cards. I want to know more about Topps baseball cards than I do for just about anything else. But a historian and an author who's written over 25 books and probably is penning one right now as we speak. But Bob, thank you so much for, one, your relationship with Marty, being able to get him on. And this is going to be a trip not only down memory lane, but a lot of history here. And I know you and Marty in particular are going to go over some things with your friend and the subject of his book, Casey Stengel. It's so many different other stories that we're going to go over today. So thank you very much, Bob.
You're welcome, Harper. And Marty, it's an honor to have you on here. And I can only say, when I call Marty, I called him the other day and I said, I'm looking for the Yankee guru, because to me, he probably, we always say, we have a guy in LA named Mark Langell, who's a Dodger publicist and been there for many years. And I call him the Dodger guru because he knows more about Dodger baseball than anybody I've ever known. This guy, and he was born in 1965, but he knows going back to 1900. I mean, the guy's amazing. And you're the same way with the New York Yankees on the East Coast. And I've always said that there's the Yankees and every 29 other teams are supporting actors and in baseball. And I'm a Dodger fan, so for me to say that, it's the facts though. And I'm honored to have you on, Marty. And I want to say this before we get going here. Now I'm going to list a few names here: Gene Shore, Frank Graham, Norman McLean, David Bagler, Joe Durso, Ira Burkow, Harry Paxton, David Canio, Charles Spain, Stephen Goldman, Jonah Winter, Maury Allen, Rob Kramer. What do they have in common with Marty Appel? They all wrote books on Casey Stengel. But what I'm going to say with what I just said about the Yankees and the rest of the 20, they're all supporting actors, because the book Marty wrote on Casey Stengel there'll never be another book written on him, because there's nothing else you could say about him, because the research he did in writing that book from the day he was born until the day he passed was truly amazing, which is why the book, I believe, was on the New York Times bestseller list. It got Boston Globe Book of the Year. It won the Casey Award they give for the greatest baseball book written in 2017. So it was just an amazing book, and I've talked more people that I know have read that book and loved it. And you know what I was thinking? Casey's been dead almost 50 years, okay? Over 50 years. And the greatest thing that's happened in his life after death was Marty writing this book. And I really believe that, because he brought him back to life all over the world. I mean, this book just rocked it. Robert Kramer's book was the best I'd seen until this one, but this just surpassed everything I've ever seen. And Marty, number one, grew up with the Yankees. He could tell you stories about doing Mickey Mantle's fan mail. I mean, the guy's had just an amazing life around baseball, and he knows the history, and he's written. I knew of Marty before he contacted me about Casey. I've read a lot of his books. So I just can't wait to hear. I'll probably learn. One thing I like about these podcasts, I learn stuff. I'll learn things about Marty that I never knew before today, and that's what I'm looking forward to hearing. So Marty, go for it, buddy, and I'm honored to have you on here.
Thank you, Bob. Great to be with you. Harper, great to be with you. When you talked about the research that went into the book, you were an important part of it, Bob. Discovering you and connecting with you was critical, because it took us to his retirement years and what his life was like back then, and you were an important part of it. I would say, in regards to all those other authors that you named, I had going for me the birth of the internet. And the internet made it possible for me to go to the small newspapers in all the minor league cities he came up in as a manager and as a player, and discover long lost anecdotes. because he was a rascal and he was funny long before the Yankees, long before Stengelese. And I had to my benefit, the access to the internet and be able to find those old stories. So that's what made it unique. And I'm very proud of it. Thank you.
Marty, if you don't mind, let's start with the book itself. Doing the research, Bob said just the other day when we were talking about having you on, it was about a year worth of conversations that you had with him. From start to finish, what was the timeline for you? And well, let's start at the beginning. Where did you get the idea to come up with a book about Casey? And if you don't mind, just give some of the background regarding when you began and how thorough it was. And I'm sure there are a lot of things that you learned about this man that we couldn't put in the book. There's just not enough room for it, but that you'd like for people to know. Is there anything in terms of that you'd want to mention here with us?
I'd just like to talk about the process itself.
Please.
There was very few people still around who played with Casey or even played for him. So it was a lot of original research into the things that happened in and around him. Now, I had the benefit of having been born in 1948, so kind of growing up with Casey is almost like a second father figure. And I remember when the Yankees let him go after the 1960 World Series, I was only 12, but I was devastated. It was like losing a father. So I didn't know how the Yankees could go on without him. It was a remarkable life he led, and he was such a father figure in that whole process to the players and to the writers and everybody he interacted with. I'm very good friends with one of the few remaining players who played for him, Bobby Richardson. And Bobby turned 90 this past summer, and I went down to South Carolina to celebrate his birthday with him. And we still were full of Casey Stengel stories. He didn't always love Casey. Casey was tough on him, but he admired him, and it was memorable and unforgettable, his experience with Casey Stengel.
If you don't mind, my 15-year-old son, Daniel, for example, loves baseball and is playing now at the high school level. He doesn't know anything about Casey Stengel. Can you tell someone in the audience, can you give me a 1 minute? I know you're going to I'm pulling this out of a hat. Just a 1 minute overview of something that he did or meant to you personally, so that a kid or someone who doesn't know anything about Casey would go, that's an interesting phenomenon. How would you summarize Casey Stengel if you had just a few moments or a couple sentences to be able to do that?
Well, I want to jump in here to say that one of the interviews I did after the book came out was in New York City. The biggest talk show on radio was Mike and the Mad Dog. And Mad Dog, who is Chris Russo, is seen on MLB Network and on Sirius XM. And he worked with two partners on his show. So when I was on as a guest, where he invited me, one of the partners, who was in his late 30s, never heard of Casey Stengel.
Yeah, Casey who, right? Yeah, there are a lot of folks that don't know anything about him, but go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, so Chris himself says, "What, you're a sports fan? You're on a radio show and you never heard of Casey Stengel?" So that was kind of amazing to Chris Russo and to me. And I did send him a book after the radio show, say, "I think you're going to like this." But Casey was a pretty good ball player, would have been chosen for a few all-star teams during his career, but was not Hall of Fame caliber. And then he became a manager, and he was very innovative as a manager, ultimately creating what was known as platoon baseball, where he really was among the first to move right and left-handers in and out of the lineup, depending on who was pitching. So he was very entertaining with the writers, which accomplished kind of selling the team to the public. and the writers loved him because he was always quotable, and he spoke in a thing called Stengalese, which was why when he didn't want to answer a question, he would just do this double talk, which came to be known as Stengalese, and everybody would just laugh and move on because nobody knew what he said, but let's get on to the next question. So he was a great character, and in that sense, a great salesman for the sport itself. Everybody in the 50s and early 60s, when he was with the Mets, they knew their baseball, they knew their history, and they were touching a guy in Casey Stengel who started in pro ball in 1910. So that was a remarkable experience for them, and it kind of brought all the generations together who loved baseball.
I'm going to do a small favor, if you don't mind. I'm going to ask one. Marty, sit tight for a second. Bob, I'm going to ask you the same question because you worked with the man, and before he passed away, you were with him for a decade. Would you mind sharing what you think of Casey Stengel and what part of his legacy is? And I'll give you a minute just to, I'm surprising you with this one, Bob, but if you can say something that is a little bit uniquely or differently associated with what Marty just did. This is just a kind of a baseball background now in a history class. So Bob, give me your example of what Casey was for you.
He doesn't need a minute. He's ready.
Well, Casey was like, my parents, I came from parents of alcoholics, and I really didn't have good parenting growing up. So Casey was more like a father-mother figure to me. He took me under his wing when I had no self-esteem, no self-worth, but I loved baseball, and he recognized that, and we were just inseparable. And back then, and Marty, he was the face of baseball. I mean, he was on the cover of Life magazine, Time magazine, Newsweek, Sports Illustrated. We would go out. I would come up to a stoplight, and people would jump out of their car and run over and shake his hand or want his autograph. Anytime we went anywhere, he was known. He was recognized, and he was the greatest guy. He used to always say, "Take care of the little guy." Those are the life lessons I learned from him. Take care of the little guy. He took care of Pete Sheehy. He took care of the clubhouse guys. He took care of the little guy, and I love that about him. He had a heart he was always generous and considerate and thoughtful, and he was also highly intelligent. And I remember things. I can hear his voice still. You know what he used to say? He always said to me that Yogi Berra was the greatest player he ever managed. That shocks people when I tell them that. But he said, Bob, he was my assistant manager. He said he used to yell when he'd talk. I heard him say this 1,000 times. He says, "They say he reads comic books. He played like a goddamn genius for me." In other words, he loved Yogi. And I've always said, Yogi's the greatest catcher in the history of baseball, not Johnny Bench, Yogi Berra. And I can prove it. He won 3 MVPs or 2, whatever it was, and then he was in the tops in the voting for 6 or 7 times. He only struck out 400 times in 19 years in the big leagues. He had 285. He had 71 World Series hits. He was on 11 World Championship teams. I mean, you can go on and on and on. And they didn't have gold gloves, or he would own more gold gloves. They didn't start those until 57. But I could go on and on about him. And, and I learned about him from Casey. When I heard Casey, you don't think that got my attention when he said Yogi Berra is the greatest player I ever had? And you think about DiMaggio and Mantle and blah, 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 blah. But, and the way he handled the pitchers and everything. And, but anyway, I just love Casey. I love being around him. And I'm so glad that Marty brought him back to life, and it made, like you're just saying, he made 15-year-olds aware of him, and it's great because without him, I would not even be alive right now. I would probably be, who knows where I would have been, because I was in juvenile hall when I was young and everything, but Casey just took me under his wing, and I will be forever indebted to that. So now I want to hear Marty talk.
Like I said, he didn't need a minute to think about it. So I went to, after the book was published, I did a publicity tour in Southern California, and Bob was great to shepherd me around We even went to Casey and Edna Stengel's home in Glendale. And it was the first time Bob had been back there since Casey was alive. So we're talking 35 or 40 years. So that was a memorable day to go to that house, which was currently occupied by, I don't want to name her, but she was a major TV star. And she was gracious enough to invite us in because she wanted to learn more about Casey Stengel too. She knew it was his house. So that was a memorable day, and it was great to spend it with you, Bob.
Absolutely. And I got to do, you did a book signing and a talk at the library. It was great.
Thank you.
Well, the history of the Yankees, for obvious reasons, and Casey's specific spot in that history is in stone, right? It's not going to be Babe Ruth, for example, Joe DiMaggio. There's so many greats. And you got to be a part of that as a very young man, didn't you, Marty? That was part of something that you, as just a kid, your one of your first gigs was to work with the Yankees. And growing up in New York and being probably a Yankee fan, right? Did you have a choice? Could you have been a Dodger fan, or would somebody in the family cut your ears off?
I was born in Brooklyn. I should have been a Dodger fan.
Should have been, yes.
But 1955 World Series, the Dodgers beat the Yankees for the first time and won their only world championship in Brooklyn.
And how old are you then? About 5, 6, 7 years old?
Like 7.
Okay.
And there I am. So I'm the one on the left. And I saw everybody rejoicing and literally dancing in the streets from my apartment on St. John's Place. And in my little 7-year-old heart, I felt bad for the losers, for the underdogs. And I decided right then and there I was going to root for the Yankees and be a Yankees fan. So it made me out of step with my neighbors and my friends, but I was a Yankees fan and stayed with them for many, many, many years, forever, really, to this day. When I was 19 and I was in college, I just got it in my head one day, maybe I could get a summer job there. So I wrote a letter to their PR director, whose name I was familiar with from editing the Yankee yearbooks every year. And I said, I'm editor of my college newspaper and a big Yankee fan. I even won one of your scorecard contests last year. And I wonder if there might be a summer position open for me. And that's me when I first started. And that's a typewriter and a telephone, if anybody doesn't know what they are. So,
well, there's another piece. It almost looks like an airplane in the very center of it, but that's a clipboard that's hanging on the wall. It's on a nail, right? Does that, I'm not asking you to say what's on the paper, but a stack of pencils. Did you sharpen those each and every day before you started? You sure look like you went through a bunch of them.
Yeah, well, pencils were in vogue then. And what's on the clipboard, I can tell you.
Really?
One of my jobs was to update the scorecard that people would buy when they came to a game. And we had all the opposing players on all teams by uniform number, the pitchers, so that when a pitching change was made and the scoreboard would show number 53 is now pitching for Detroit, I was the one who was keeping tabs of all the transactions and the players coming and going, and then I would provide that to our printer, so we were very up to date. Good for you for asking. Nobody ever asked what that was. So anyway, I wrote this letter, and I was invited in for an interview by Bob Fischel. And it turned out he needed someone to tackle Mickey Mantle's fan mail. Mickey was headed for his 18th season with the Yankees. He had sort of given up on taking fan mail home and answering it. So they needed somebody to really just open it, read it, address the envelope back, and send it. And there's me in the Mick.
Now that is a great picture. Great.
My rookie season.
You're a rookie there, right? Does he treat you like a rookie too? Did he call you one?
He was great. And it was his last year, although we didn't acknowledge it at the time. but we stayed friends for the rest of his life. I don't know what he saw in this very New York bred kid, but we got along terrific. And I was laughing with somebody the other day when my kids were born many years later, got gifts for them from Mickey, baby gifts. Now, he didn't have, I mean, his wife did the shopping, I'm sure, but they had the kids' names on them, not his name. So it's like, if it said from Mickey Mantle, they'd be worth a lot more now, but they just had the names of the kids. So what? But that was a funny memory that he and his wife Merlin took the trouble to send me baby gifts. That was wonderful.
Well, I have to ask, Marty, how old were you in this this first photograph that I showed?
19.
19 years old, and you're working for the New York Yankees, and they just so happen to be your favorite team. Now, I know things have changed a lot in recent years, where the conglomeration and the world appeal and the Yankee name and logo and all that kind of stuff. But did you ever pinch yourself and go, I cannot believe that I am working with this organization and getting to call Yankee Stadium my home, where I'm gainfully employed?
Yeah, it happened a lot. I would be driving to work in the morning and I would think, my God, look at this job I got. And then when we moved into the rehabilitated Yankee Stadium in 1976, I actually had an office with windows that looked out onto the field. Picture George Costanza's office on Seinfeld. That was what I had. And that was an amazing experience, just to stare down and sometimes daydream that there was where Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig and Joe DiMaggio and the Mick played. And by the way, when the Yankees get around to retiring uniform numbers, like this year they're doing 52 for CC Sabathia, to my mind, they could have quit after 3, 4, 5, and 7. That would have been fine. The fifth one was Casey Stengel, number 37. But 3, 4, 5, and 7, enough said. That was the Yankee dynasty right there.
Well, they're going to have to go into the 90s now. They have so many. I got to go to Monument Park last year for the first time in my life. And I have to admit, even though I'm not a Yankee fan, my love of the game and the heritage and the history of it is certainly one where they don't have many more numbers that they've got that are open right now. They should start allowing players to wear those numbers again. But go back with me, because there's a part of your public relations job and your position that you get there after being there for a while, where you mentioned the Babe and Lou Gehrig, and I have pictures of them up right now, but the importance of the history, not only of what they did, but what they meant to baseball and how baseball became America's pastime for all those many decades before football kind of took over. But the Yankees were the cornerstone of all of it.
And Babe Ruth especially. When Babe Ruth was in his prime in the 1920s, when the Yankees team was known as Murderers Row, I write that only the President of the United States and Charlie Chaplin were as well known as Babe Ruth. So you're talking about a lot of households that had immigrant families living there, didn't know the first thing about baseball, but everybody knew about Babe Ruth. And so he brought the game to so many more households than had previously been baseball followers. His contribution of the game and changing it into the game that we still know as home run driven, the home run being such an exciting play. You could have retired just his number and nobody else's, and it would have said a lot. But he was actually the second one who had his number retired. Lou Gehrig came first when he died so young at age 37. And he wore number 4, and that was the first one the Yankees retired.
Can you do me a small favor and go down that lane with me? It's a rabbit trail. When you mentioned that Babe changed the game with the home run, Is it true that he and Ty Cobb had a bitter rivalry over the way that baseball was being played, where Ty said, I'm going to get a single, or I'm going to bunt my way on, I'm going to steal second. The second guy up is going to move me over to third base. The next guy is going to hit a line drive into right field, and I'm going to be able to score on the pop fly. That's how we generate a run. And Babe is saying, I can just hit the ball over the fence and I can get a run, and it's a lot simpler, easier, and the fans go wild. Was that rivalry between the two of them and the way the game was played, was that genuine?
It was genuine, but it wasn't hostile, but they represented different eras of the game. Cobb's style was what baseball knew, and the ball was dead. The ball didn't carry that well. So to know that Babe Ruth hit all those home runs in the early 20s with what was still a dead ball. I mean, having worked in baseball, I can bring things down to something that's just easy to understand. When the lively ball was introduced in the 20s, baseball teams were like mom and pop operations. It wasn't that they threw out all the old baseballs. They mixed them in.
Yeah.
Babe was hitting a lot of dead balls for home runs as well as the new lively ball. It didn't seem to affect him at all. But in their retirement years, Cobb lived until 1961, Babe until 1948. They played a lot of golf together. They made a lot of public appearances together, and they greatly respected each other's abilities, even if they reflected different eras.
You mentioned the dead ball, or at least, back in those days, foul balls would go back into the game, wouldn't they? The fans would throw them back, and there was a big to-do about, hey, don't let any ball get away. Today, you even look at a ball the wrong way, it's gone, and they'll never use it again. But back then, there were scuff marks, and they had been beaten up pretty badly. And Babe swung a 50-ounce bat, or was it 52-ounce bat? It's amazing how strong that man was.
Yeah, I've read 52 in many places. I never held one to see. I mean, I couldn't have gotten around myself on a practice swing that heavy, but it was.
Amazing. And you mentioned Lou Gehrig. There's a shot here, and then one of the really a portion of American history, not just baseball history, is today I consider myself the luckiest man
on the face of the earth.
On the face of the earth. What an amazing piece of history there, in a horrible disease that ends up taking his name and his life. All a part of the history, and what an amazing player he was. And to lose that, how old was he when he retired, when Lou couldn't play anymore?
He was 35, and
35.
He died 37.
Yeah.
And to parents, he was the epitome of the role model that they wanted their kids to be like. And he handled that role so well. I mean, he lived with his parents till he got married at 30. He was mama's boy. But his impact in terms of influencing young fans was enormous. And a lot of people would say Lou Gehrig, I respect Babe Ruth, but Lou Gehrig is my favorite player. Love to watch him play. And there could be no argument. I mean, people will still say, name the top 5 baseball players of all time, and both Ruth and Gehrig will appear on the list.
Yeah. Rivalry between Lou and Babe, or George Herman, Babe Ruth, right? The two of them, Babe would hit a home run and Lou would just stand with his bat, both hands on it. They wouldn't really shake hands at home plate. Little bit of different lifestyles, I think you could say, right, between the two of them.
Yeah, it wasn't like they went out in Prohibition to find speakeasies together. Babe was all alone in that category.
There was. Yeah.
And their wives had a dispute over one feeling the other had disrespected her or something like that. And the husbands came to defend the wives. So that was impactful. You can sometimes see in photographs that they weren't seeing eye to eye. But that faded over years. When I ran Old Timers Days for the Yankees in the 70s, we would invite them both. I became friendly with both, arranging their transportation and their seating, but we kind of knew not to seat them together so as not to make an uncomfortable afternoon.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, gosh, running old timers days, you've got an amazing conglomeration. There's almost like who, or do we run out of guys? So talk a little bit about the Clipper right here. Joe DiMaggio, for obvious reasons. He's another one of those guys that's on the list of all-time favorites.
I wish she had brought Marilyn to one of our old timers days, but they were divorced by the time I was involved. If he didn't have the respect and admiration of millions as a player, once he married Marilyn Monroe, the admiration was sealed. She was America's golden child. Everybody loved Marilyn Monroe, and by connection came to really admire and love Joe DiMaggio.
Sure.
For snaring this woman.
Yeah.
They were only married like 9 months. It didn't really work out, but people always associated the two names together. It was a treat for me to work with DiMaggio on those old timers days. And I remember once there was an old timers day in Washington, D.C., and I was helping out with it, called the Cracker Jack Old Timers Games. And Joe was a guest. And when he saw me in the clubhouse amongst all these strangers, Marty, how you doing? Come over here. What a feeling that was, that he remembered my name. And even though I was out of context, I wasn't in the Yankee clubhouse. So that was a wonderful moment for me, just for Joe to call me over by name.
Class guy all the way to the end. A lot of folks, again, you bring up kids and certain things, and my kids would say, "Oh, Mr. Coffee." No, he was one of the greatest players ever, and the hitting streak is his, right? And his place in Yankee history, and obviously in the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, speaks for itself as well. And kind of in a different era, right? You got Babe and Lou at one point, but then you bring in the 40s and 50s a different era, and Joe ends up being the center fielder. His brother, of course, plays for the Red Sox, and his place in Yankee history is kind of in its own era, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. That was well defined. And his teammates and opponents just thought of him as perfection. Like, he never made a mistake. He never misplayed a ball. He never threw to the wrong base. His instinct for the game was just so great. And there's a statistics, I may not be getting it exactly right here, but I think he hit 361 home runs and struck out 369 times in his whole career.
Wow.
That's kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just like me, he has more strikeouts than home runs. So, no big deal. But I'm teasing with you, Marty. To have it be that small of a differentiation, what an amazing thing. And Bob brought him up earlier. Here's one of the great. Oh, well, let's talk about the line out deep into left center, if I'm not mistaken, that DiMaggio had, where after he touches second base, he knows that it was a catch and that he was out, and it was a real big deal, and he kind of kicked the dirt a little bit. That's the most emotion anybody had ever seen out of the man, wasn't it?
It was, and also, which he probably didn't know at the time, and no Yankee fans really took note of it until I wrote about it, that would have been his only left field home run in the World Series.
Oh my goodness, really? Okay.
Yeah, he hit however many home runs he hit in the World Series, might have been 8 or 10, all went to right field. And that would have been his only left field home run, certainly in Yankee Stadium, because the dimension was so deep. He hit them during the regular season, but not in the World Series. That would have been the only one.
Yeah, you only had to hit a ball about 700 or 800 feet to get out of left center at Yankee Stadium, right?
Not quite, but you get the idea.
Yeah, pretty much. I've got a series here. Bob had mentioned it earlier when we were talking about Casey, about the greatest catcher of all time, and this is one of the great plays. Obviously, talk a little bit about Yogi and what his legacy was for the Yankees, not only as a player but then later on as a manager.
Sure. Now, on this is a famous play here where Jackie Robinson steals home plate in the 1955 World Series. And Yogi argued ferociously with the home plate umpire that Jackie was out. And the photographs are sort of inconclusive, but if you knew Yogi Berra, you knew he never lied. He never made up stories. If he said he was out, he actually believed he was out. So I always go with Yogi on that. He would, he lived many years after that play.
Marty, you just said earlier in the broadcast that this is the World Series that changed you and you became a Yankee fan forever anyways. But you were living in Brooklyn, so how can you tell me that Jackie was not out?
My black and white TV with the rabbit ears didn't really get a good picture of it.
They didn't have instant replay back then, and they didn't have, they didn't call the booth and go to New York to go get the folks in the studio to help them out.
They didn't even have zero sugar Hershey bars back then.
Nothing.
But I had to trust Yogi. If he went to his deathbed maintaining that Jackie was out, I was in. That counted. That was the deciding voice.
Hey, Marty, I wanted to ask you something. I've always said Yogi was 5'8". He didn't look like an athlete, and he was known as Yogi the Bear. What did he say to Carmen? He said, "Where are you going tonight?" And she says, "I'm going to go see Dr. Zhivago." He says, "What the F is wrong with you now?" In other words, that's what he was known for, and I think that hurt his reputation as a great catcher because he was known more for yogiisms and being a clown and being and it really, I believe, hurt his reputation as being the greatest catcher of all time. That's what I heard. What do you think about that, Marty?
I think that's totally true, and of course, it's not his fault. It was the writers loved funny Yogi stories, so that's what we were inundated with during his playing career. But he was a genius at the game,
100%.
and pretty smart guy also when you drew him out in conversation. One of these guys who would see through the forest and get right to the point.
Hey, Marty, he also, you know what I loved about him? He was like a mob guy. He knew where all the bodies were buried, the Copacabana, all the bodies. He was out there, but he never said a word. He was like a wooden Indian. He never said a word.
A smart man at that.
Yeah.
A smart man. Marty, do you have a favorite Yogiism, something that he said? Mine is absolutely, I have to know a little bit about it because when I first heard it, I go, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But it wasn't dumb when you realize the meaning behind it. When you come to the fork in the road, take it, right? But I get it now because he was talking about the directions to his house. One of the ball players said, "Hey, where do you live?" You go down this street. When you come to the fork in the road, there was a street that went around. There, New York has some different avenues, but if you went to the left or the right, you could get back onto that street again and then take that to his home. When you come to the fork in the road, take it. It's just one of those stupid things that you say when the fat lady sings and baseball is 50%. No, it's 90% mental. The other half is physical. Just the stuff that he said that you have to think about. It's kind of like when Ringo sang 8 days a week, or different things that come out of people's mouths that just make you think and they laugh. And did you have a favorite?
Well, I had a favorite which is not as funny, but it was because I think it was his last yogiism. I was visiting him in his assisted living place near the end of his life. And a nurse came in, and Yogi said to the nurse, "What time is 2:00 Mass?" Because he knew it never starts at 2. So he was getting right to the point with a brilliant statement. What time is 2:00 Mass? And he died just like 8 or 9 days after that. So I'd like to think I got the last yogiism, and that makes it my favorite.
Well, who's buried in Grant's tomb? Bob, do you have one?
I love 2 of them. One, he went out to a pizza place and they said, "Do you want us to cut it in 8s or 4?" And he said, "I'm starving, cut it in 8s. And the other one was he went to a restaurant that was jam-packed and he said, "No wonder this place never does any business. It's always too crowded."
Yeah.
A lot of wisdom there.
It really is. Isn't it amazing that he says some of the stuff that you go, that doesn't make any sense, but it does, and it fits perfectly. Gosh, yeah. What time is 2:00 mass? Like, I love it. It's so funny.
Now, see, I learned. That's great. You told me that, Marty. That now I have that one. That was the last one he ever said. That's great.
And no wonder they don't do any business. They're always busy. Oh my gosh. And he gets away with it. Anything else about him that you would recognize, Marty, that you just go, his accomplishments as a player, for obvious reasons, so good. Gosh.
Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about his World War II service, and that he was a gunner on a Navy vessel at Normandy, and he was the only professional baseball player who happened to be at Normandy on D-Day, major leagues or minor leagues. And we never made that big a deal about it when he was a player preparing his biographies for yearbook and press guide and things. It was like, oh, that's interesting, but that's huge.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so we fell a little short in that sense. Part of it is I didn't have a full appreciation for what that meant. I joined the Yankees. I was born after the war. I didn't have a full appreciation for the gallantry of the men who served. Similarly, Ralph Houck, who was the Yankee manager in the early 60s, was a major in the Army. And when he got out, he resumed his baseball career. And his nickname was the Major. And I would write his biography in yearbook and press guide and other things. But I came to research and realize it was the highest rank any baseball personality had ever achieved. There were no other majors or higher. So I should have written that in his biographical stuff, but I didn't. So regrets. I've had a few.
Wasn't Bobby Brown a war hero too, Marty?
No, he served. So they're all war heroes by today's thinking.
Yeah. Jerry Coleman, right, too. Jerry Coleman also.
Jerry Coleman was in 2 wars.
Yeah.
As was Ted Williams.
Ted Williams, yeah.
I want to tell you a story. You know what rocked me? One day I had to take Bob Feller to an appearance out here in L.A. So I'm driving him to the airport, and I'm just talking to him. And I said, Bob, this is a different generation, I said, Bob, what's your greatest thrill? And I thought he was going to tell me, when I was 19, I pitched or I won 20, blah, blah, blah. He said, Bobby, my greatest thrill was December 8th. It rocked me. 1941, I became an artillery gunner and joined the service to fight for my country. He said, that was my greatest thrill. And I went, how about this? He won 26 games, I believe, in 41. And when he came back, he won 27. I mean, so, these are things people, you talk about a hero. I mean, this guy, he said it was the biggest thrill he ever had to fight for his country. So that's a kind of a generation of players we had back then.
Absolutely. And Ted Williams did 2 tours of duty, the World War and Korea, but he fought like hell to stay out of Korea. He tried everything. He was making a lot of money as a baseball player, and he wasn't anxious to give it up. Interestingly, we digress when we talk about Ted Williams, but in 1954, Ted got a divorce, and his accountant said to him, you realize all the money you make in 1955 playing baseball is going to go to your ex-wife. And he said, well, the hell with that. And he quit. He didn't go to spring training in 55, and he didn't go to opening day. And he met a fan at South Station in Boston. And the fan said, Mr. Williams, you can't quit. You're 17 home runs from hitting 400, and you're 29 RBIs away from going into the top 10. And he rattled off all these statistics. Players weren't that conscious of statistics back then.
That's right.
The kid talked Ted into returning in 55, and he played until 1960. running up all those career stats thanks to this kid.
Yeah. Ted Williams had 20/10 vision. So his vision was twice as sharp as anybody else's. And he said one of the things that kept him alive was his ability to see German aircraft and hide in the clouds, so to speak, before they ever got a chance to see him. Chuck Yeager had the same situation with his vision, just eagle eyes, and it made such a powerful difference. And obviously, as a baseball player, that was a huge difference for him. Thank you for going over. Even though it's non-Yankee, we can talk about others, and we certainly do. During your research, you find all kinds of interesting things, so thank you for that. If you don't mind me asking, we talked about Yogi. Can we go into another guy that really, from the 1960s, was basically the hero that everybody wanted to emulate, Mickey Mantle? What was it like? You had the picture with him just a little bit earlier. What was it like? You started with the Yankee organization as a guy that was basically answering his fan mail.
Yeah, and getting to know him was one of the thrills of my life. We stayed in touch till he died in 1995. What's interesting to me now is that everybody who played with him still talks about being his teammate, still talks about his heroics on the field. I mentioned earlier that I spent a weekend with Bobby Richardson when he turned 90 last summer. And, we told baseball stories all weekend. He must have told 25 Mickey Mantle stories. He was so admiring of Mickey all these years later. He didn't tell stories about his own career. He told stories about being Mickey Mantle's teammate.
Hey, I got a Mickey story for you. I'm a kid working in the clubhouse, 1964 visitor clubhouse. Mickey, now people don't realize, I'm sure Marty knows this, the Yankees had two trainers named Gus Mock and Joe Soros.
That's right.
And I watched him. They worked on him for an hour before the game. And before he put his uniform on, he looked like a mummy. He had tape, like ace bandage all the way down his whole. I'd never seen anything like it. And people have no idea. That vision is in my mind forever, what he had to go through just to go out on the field. Am I right, Marty?
Oh, you're totally right. And he had so many serious injuries during his career, and he still performed so well. I mean, when he retired, he was third on the all-time home run list. He's way down now because of the modern era and guys hitting 500, but he was third behind only Babe Ruth and Willie Mays. And when he was in high school, he had a football injury, which started him on having an injury-prone career. But he was, by many accounts, the greatest natural baseball player there ever was before those injuries came along. And Casey was always disappointed that he didn't get more out of Mickey Mantle because he knew of the potential. And he knew of the injuries, but he felt he didn't get the full Mickey Mantle.
You got to meet him face to face. Here he is on the left, kind of skinny, young kid out of Oklahoma, but a farm boy, but just country strong too. I mean, he didn't lift a lot of weights, but fast. Can you talk a little bit about just you said he was just a natural baseball player, the speed that he had when he could run. Now, Bob said he was a mummy there during that last year or two in his career just to get on the field. But dig a little deeper with me, Marty, about just, if he wasn't drinking, Bob, I know you can attest to this, 650, maybe 700, he would have probably, one time he was asked, he said, Mickey, we all knew that you went out last night because we were with you. And we barely got up this morning and you hit your first pitch. It's a home run. How'd you do it? And he said, oh, it's easy. There were 3 balls coming at me. I just swung at the one in the middle. Right. He was playing with a hangover. Tell me a little bit more, Marty, about, what an amazing baseball player he was.
Well, people remember that he was a switch hitter, and he remains one of the great switch hitters of baseball history. What's kind of lost in the telling is that when he came up as a switch hitter, it was like all people could talk about because switch hitters were really rare back then. I think when his rookie season, I think there were 3 others in all the major leagues.
Right.
And when he batted left-handed, he would get to first base in 3.1 seconds, which may not sound like a lot to you, but if you hold a stopwatch to today's guys, they don't come close to that. So he really had it all, speed and power. And
100%.
yeah.
Bob, you mentioned earlier to me, not on this show, but in other conversations that we've had, that you knew Mickey was one of those guys. And if you needed more detail, folks, go look at the Bob Costas interviews. There's 2 really good ones, different years where Bob interviews Mickey. And one of the things you said, Bob, was that Mickey was a real shy individual and would kind of be very quiet and reserved until he got to know you. And then after he got a chance to meet you, then he's going to be Mickey, and he's going to welcome you, and I'll buy you a drink or whatever. You're one of the boys. But he appeared to some as being a standoffish type of person. Can you talk a little bit, Bob, if you don't mind, and then Marty obviously comment on that afterwards?
Well, Mickey Mantle was the nicest guy in the world to me. He's like Casey. He took care of the little guy. He was always nice to me. He was always gracious. And I went out with him a few times, and I think Mickey Mantle was basically a very shy person. Thrust from Oklahoma, a small town, put in Manhattan, becoming Mickey Mantle, I don't think he was that comfortable with, and which is the drinking, and that's what players, they all drank back then. It was, Bobby Richardson's probably the only Yankee that didn't drink, but then that's why he's still alive. But I mean, they all drank heavily, and that's just the way it was. It was a different. I'm going to tell you a funny story Casey said about Bobby Richardson. This is a hilarious story. He said, a reporter said, "What do you think of Bobby Richardson?" He said, "He don't smoke, he don't swear, he don't drink, he don't chase women, and he can't hit a curveball." No, but Casey loved Bobby Richardson. But I'm just saying that was then back in those days, as Marty knows, that's what the guys did. They don't do that today. They go home to their families. Everybody's got a camera with a cell phone today. They can't go out to bars. They can't do anything. It's like a whole different world today. And the money they're making today, back in those days, they had jobs in the off season, but Mickey Mantle was one of the sweetest. If you get the real Mickey Mantle, and Marty knows this, one of the sweetest, kindest, nicest, gentle. Wouldn't you say he was a gentle guy, Marty?
Yeah, let me tell this story. In 1951, Whitey Ford was in the service. It was Mickey's rookie year, so he and Ford didn't have any interaction. Whitey was in the service. Whitey got married that year and invited the whole team to this bar restaurant in Queens where they had their reception. So the Yankees chartered a bus to take the team to the restaurant, and all the players went in to celebrate Whitey's wedding. Mickey stayed in the bus because he didn't know Whitey. He'd never met him, and he was too shy to just go in and crash the party. Eventually, Whitey came out to the bus when he said, "Where's Mickey Mantle?" And they said, "He's in the bus."
Wow.
So Whitey came out to the bus and walked him back in. But that's a great little sweet story.
Now that's another one I never heard. Thank you, Marty.
You're welcome.
That's a great story. Never heard that.
Well, Marty, you were there for a different era. George Steinbrenner takes over. The Yankees had not won a world championship. You get to meet some of the current stars, if you will, the Reggie Jacksons, the Thurman Munsons. I've got Goose Gossage and Ron Guidry on the tip of my tongue. A very different lineup back in those days, but they started to piece things together in the late 70s. Talk about your experience with the Yankee organization, one, and then how things changed. The game itself was changing. Free agency, the amount of money, computers, everything was really revolutionizing the game. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I'd like to roll everything back to before then, except for the World Championships they won. But Mr. Steinbrenner came in and declared that the Yankees are going to be back to the World Series. And within 4 years they were, because he was determined to get every good player on the market. And free agency came along and he was able to accomplish a lot of that. Mr. Steinbrenner was a really impactful owner, probably the most up to his time that there was. And what he did, which he doesn't get enough credit for, is make the Yankees into an international brand. You can't walk through a street in Europe without seeing people wearing Yankee caps.
Yep.
And that's remarkable. And be interesting to see if the Dodgers have that kind of impact, or if they want it, if it matters to them. But the Yankees certainly did.
Colin Cowherd, years ago, I was listening to him on the radio. This is before, satellite and XM, and he was just doing a show that was being simulcast from his New York studios. And he said, when we come back, I'm going to tell you why George Steinbrenner is the greatest owner in professional sports history. I'll be back right after this. And I was going to do something. I waited the 3 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it was. And I came back and thank you, Colin. You went right back to it. You didn't tease it anymore. Here's why George Steinbrenner is the greatest. He took free agency to a different level because he realized that the Yankees, when they went to Kansas City or Cleveland, Detroit, when they went to Seattle, or they played in Texas or Anaheim, if you had stars in your lineup, you would fill the stadium up on Tuesdays, on Thursdays. Yeah, the weekend series with the Red Sox, don't worry about a sellout there. But what's going to happen when you're in Kansas City on a Monday night? So I'm going to get these guys like Reggie Jackson and Catfish Hunter, and I'm going to sign Guidry to a deal, and I'm going to bring in Goose Gossage, and we're going to be worth seeing on Monday evening. Is there any portion of that you go, you know what, that not only makes sense, but yes, that's the George Steinbrenner that I knew too. The entrepreneur, the businessman, the way to make this club and this organization bigger than it possibly could be because we got the right players at the right time.
Yeah, that's an accurate description. And he really didn't seem bothered by salary caps or, cutting off his player salary limit. He was all out to win. And even if it required paying a luxury tax for his payroll, he was all out to win. End of story.
Yeah, simply put, it's it's a cutthroat business. Bob, do you have anything that you were going to comment on that?
No, I think to me, there's a select group of owners in the history of baseball, starting with, I think Bill Veeck was unbelievable. And I think George Steinbrenner was unbelievable about opening up new things. And even Ted Turner I thought, did some really innovative things, to just different stuff, having, the TBS and making the Atlanta Braves the base America's team and all that, just the whole thing. But I think George Steinbrenner is the Yankees always had great owners. I thought Del Webb and Dan Topping were great owners, but Steinbrenner was just a new breed, another era of an owner. And for his era, he was innovative and goes down as, to me, and all the players liked him. We had Reggie Jackson on this podcast, and Reggie loved Steinbrenner, loved him. And so, it's like, you hear the stories from the players, and I think he just was a great owner. I remember when him and Yogi had a parting, and I'm so glad they made up. Tell us about that, Marty.
Well, he made Yogi the manager in 1984, and then in spring training 85, they weren't playing very well. And I think maybe 12 or 14 games into that season, 1985, Mr. Steinbrenner fired him. Huh. The team wasn't playing well, but, they were 8-12 or something in April. So, and he didn't do it himself. He didn't respect who Yogi Berra was. And he sent Clyde King, one of his front office guys, a former Brooklyn Dodger pitcher, to tell Yogi, go home, you're dismissed. Well, Yogi rightfully felt that was so wrong and so disrespectful that for like 16 years he didn't return to Yankee Stadium. And it broke Mr. Steinbrenner's heart because he recognized what an icon Yogi was. And finally, one of Yogi's grandchildren said to him, "Dad, you're never going back to Yankee Stadium. We've never seen you get cheered there." So he arranged to make up with him at the Yogi Berra Museum one day. And just the act of getting George Steinbrenner to go to the museum rather than, well, have Yogi come in, then that was a big act by George Steinbrenner, and it went a long way.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Well, the organization itself, again, the end of the Mick, so to speak, in that era, you had Bobby Mercer. That was going to be the next Mickey Mantle, and that didn't work out. So the late 60s, early 70s, dominated by the Oakland A's of all things, and then some of the other teams when George takes over. And you're there till about 77, and that's obviously what the team had turned it around by then. They had lost in 76, if I'm not mistaken, to the Big Red Machine, and then they win it in 77, 78, and then they play again in 80. So a lot of great things happen, and you get a chance to obviously meet some of those guys, and one of them is Thurman Munson. You ended up writing a book about Thurman. Talk a little bit about him and his impact on you and obviously on the organization.
I did 2 books. One was with Thurman, his autobiography, and then 30 years after he tragically died in a plane crash, I had a chance to do a full biography, which included the aftermath of the plane crash, which actually wound up taking about the final third of the book. The way he'd come to be revered and respected. For the photo section, I went to the stadium early one day, and I just took pictures from their backs of all the fans wearing Munson jerseys.
Yeah.
And that became one of the pictures in the book. He was a real leader, a very smart baseball guy, and had total respect from all his teammates, which is why he became the first Yankee captain since Lou Gehrig. Now, the story of that was Mr. Steinbrenner. We had a preseason meeting of all the front office people, and Billy Martin was there, and Mr. Steinbrenner said, "Now, Billy, this is up to you, but I think we could accomplish a lot if we had a captain. And I'm not saying you need to do it, and I'm not saying who you should pick, although I'm sure we're all thinking the same name. But I'm leaving it up to you. So do with it what you want." And with that, Billy made Thurman the captain in 1976. Thurman won the MVP award, led the team to the World Series, and became one of the prominent figures in Yankee history.
Yep. Tough guy, right? You know, maybe not the favorite of all. I know he and Reggie didn't see eye to eye on many cases, but, you know, what an example. I mean, just a gritty blue collar. I bring my lunch pail every day to work, and, you know, whether you like it or not, I'm going to get a hit, and we're going to probably tag somebody out at home plate, right? That's a day's work for him.
Yeah, he was a lunch bucket kind of player, and his teammates loved him for that.
Sure. And then, like I said, the lineup starts changing too. You bring in this guy as a free agent, and a lot of people forget that Reggie was in Baltimore after he goes to, after basically the breakup of the A's. Catfish Hunter, who had been a Yankee, and then Reggie are reunited a couple of years later. That's in 76, if I'm not mistaken, the first year that Reggie was there.
77.
77? I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you for correcting me. Then you bring in these guys. You get a closer in Goose Gossage. You got Louisiana Lightning and Guidry. Things are looking good right about the time that you're leaving the Yankees, aren't they?
Yeah. Obviously with mixed feelings because of my fandom for the Yankees. But I now had a family and a child, and it was time to move on with my career. You have to understand, if you have a career in baseball, that's your life. That's your wife. That's your everything. Because you play all those night games and all those weekend games, and you still have to be back at the office at 9 o'clock the following day. There's hardly any time to grow up and live a real life. So I made that tough decision.
And not an easy one, right? I mean, was it obviously the right decision for you and your family. But when you think about, especially just after you leave the World Series, the change in the organization, the growth of the game and the Yankees itself. But you decided there were some things that you needed to do. And one of them was authoring some books. Casey came a little bit later. Munson came a little bit later. Can you tell us a little bit about the impetus between getting your professional career post-Yankees started, your entrepreneurial spirit and allowing for your television and sports media, your management, all the companies that you were a part of, but then your love for writing and being able to pen 25 different books?
I think my passion for writing turned out to be greater than whatever abilities I had at public relations, because I'm more introverted than I am extroverted.
Okay.
And writing suited me very well. I wound up doing 25 books. I'm done, but I did 25 books, and I figure I have nothing left to say. But one of them, besides Munson and Casey Stengel, was called Pinstripe Empire, which was the history of the franchise all the way back to 1903 when it was born. And that's the one that there's a picture of me doing signings for that book.
Yep.
And it's over 600 pages, and I had to cut a lot, but it is considered the definitive history of the team. And we've updated it a couple of times since it was first published. I'm very, very, very proud of that book.
Marty, what book would you say, is there any, if somebody said, what's the one book you're the proudest of, what would you say?
Well, that's it, Pinstripe Empire.
That's the whole history, yeah. And let me ask you this, Marty, if somebody said, Marty, in your life and your career, what's the one thing you're the proudest of, what would it be?
Oh, my friendships with significant baseball people, even if they weren't all stars, the ones that just made an impact on me. I talked to Peter Bavesi, who's a retired baseball executive, and we always talk about how it's not the games, it's the stories, and it's the people.
Yep.
And that's what I love about my time with in baseball.
Great answer. Thank you.
You mentioned the books and the Tom Seaver. You got My 9 Innings with Lee McPhail. You got Working at the Plate with Eric Gregg, so an umpire. DiMaggio, Yogi Berra. Let me think. 100 classic moments in the history of the game regarding baseball. The Munson story, 162 and 0. The Casey, of course, Pinstripes by the Tail. A lot of different things that are a part of it. The amount of research that you've got to do in order for you to feel good about knowing everything from all the angles. Tell us what that's like, because we started the show and you were sharing some stories about, these small newspapers and going on fish, right? Microfiche documents. And now with the internet, just being able to do all the research that's necessary to get the history and do it in an accurate manner. What was that like for you? And was it a labor of love, and that you want to make sure you do it right? Tell us a little bit about, what that experience is like.
Well, I love the research as much as the writing process. For instance, the process of doing Pinstripe Empire, I started out putting all the names down of people who you couldn't have a Yankee history without their name being in the book. And then all the great moments in Yankee history, from the opening of Yankee Stadium to the Lou Gehrig Memorial Service, onto the purchase of the team by George Steinbrenner, all the moments that you couldn't write a Yankee history without this in it. So that was sort of my guideline. And then I filled in events and personalities besides those as I went along. The internet, like in Casey Stengel's case, he broke in 1910 in a town called Kankakee, where he was a player. And none of his previous biographers could find any stories out of Kankakee. But with the internet, I could get the Kankakee Daily newspaper, search for Casey Stengel, or actually Dutch Stengel, as he was known then, and come up with 10 or 12 stories that have been long forgotten or nobody ever heard of. And it's fleshed out all these stops in his career and all the events that took place there. The Kankakee Ballpark was next door to what they call then an asylum for the insane. And some reporter asked a player, "Where do you hope to be promoted to next year?" And the player answered and pointed at Casey and said, "But I can tell you where he's going to be." And he pointed to the asylum. So what a rich anecdote that was to put in his rookie season as a player.
Yeah. Nothing like a veteran to say, "Hey, kid, you're crazy," and you're destined to be next door. The picture that I added a moment ago, and I'm going to put it back up now, is that what your desk looks like every day, with just mounds of paper and doing the research? And when you're writing a book, and I know you said you're done, but I'm just saying the amount of time and effort in order for you to feel good about it. What's that process like for you?
Well, it is that sloppy when I'm working on a book.
There you go.
But when I'm not, my wife comes in and says, "Are you going to clean off the top of your desk?" So I've been warned.
Okay. Yeah, be a neat freak out here, Marty. Make sure you do it the right way. When do you feel, okay, I've got everything that I need to, from a background perspective, from a research perspective, from talking to a guy like Bob Case for hours on end to get additional stories and get the right angle and get the feel for it? What's that process like for you?
I could have done the whole book with just Bob Case and nothing else. He was that helpful. But the process really at that stage sort of moves to the editor, who says, "All right, we're dealing with an 800-pound gorilla here. You're going to have to start cutting, not adding."
Right.
So that's painful for me as a writer. And some of those things I cut took hours to research and write.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. That's the business.
During the cut, do you think, okay, I got 100 words right here. I've got an important paragraph. I'm just going to knock it down to 50. Does the editor go, no, you don't understand. All 100 go. It's gone. Was that like removing part of your spleen and your gallbladder and your left eye? It hurts, right?
Yeah, it hurts. And it wasn't like, well, let me start over and whittle this down to 25 words. Too much of the task. So I would just cut paragraphs, and it was painful. Any writer could tell you that.
Are there any good stories that you can assure us that they're on the floor still? They haven't been put into Pinstripe Empire or any of the others, but they sure should be. Anything that you can share with us?
Actually, at the moment, I can't just conjure up one, so we have to let that pass.
Yeah, that's fine. No problem at all. But you said Bob, for example. Who are some of the other guys that you end up talking to? Go, man, I am so glad that I interviewed blank, or I spoke to this person's relative that gave me some insight that I would never have had otherwise. Because really, if you don't bring the story out, or if you don't get it documented, it falls by the wayside forever, doesn't it? I mean, there's a risk of that.
Yeah, most helpful were actually the early Mets, because he was a different kind of person than when he managed the Yankees. So bringing that forward, he used to have a reputation for falling asleep on the bench during games. The Yankees never acknowledged that, but the Met players did. So there was a lot from the Mets players about his late in life final years as a manager, and they were really interesting.
Well, that's because he was having a few cocktails the night before.
Yeah. Well, and plus, wasn't that first year didn't the Mets break a record for being the worst team in baseball history?
They sure did. 120 losses. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Gil Hodges comes in right in '69, and they're winning a World Series. I mean, it was a very quick turnaround for the organization.
Casey lived to see it, got a World Series ring, and was moved and joyous over that victory, which all of America latched onto as one of the great sports stories of all times.
Your thoughts, Bob?
Oh, my thoughts were, yeah, it was great. Casey was like the face of that franchise when it was more of like a Yogi Berra comic book story. Casey was dancing and doing stuff and doing all this stuff he was the face of the Mets. But then when Gil Hodges, another classy great guy, took over, they actually the Miracle Mets. I mean, they'll go down in history as, yeah. I'll still never understand how they could beat that team they beat, but with Ron Swoboda's catch and that it's all history. It was like just amazing. Amazing. And then you look at their pitching staff. My God, they had Nolan Ryan and Tom Seaver and a young Nolan Ryan and other guys. All these great pitchers. Jerry
Holtzman and Kuzman. Yeah, they had they sure won it with pitching, didn't they, Marty?
Yeah, which usually is the way to develop a roster. You can go far with good pitching. And by the way, I think the Yankees are in good shape for this season because they got 7 or 8 bona fide starters. And I really think they could make an impact. The question now for baseball fans is, are the Dodgers what the Yankees used to be and just running slipshod over everybody else and getting better every year? So I understand why people used to hate the Yankees, and it's kind of repeating itself with the Dodgers now.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say the Dodgers have made. I got to say it's hard for me to compare like a Buzzy Bavasi to the general manager of the Dodgers now. They're completely. It's a different era, different characters. But this Andrew Friedman guy is very, very, very smart. And what I like about him is the guys. He doesn't just get star players. He gets guys that are great in the clubhouse. Because this team. Even this Diaz they got from the Mets, I heard him on an interview the other day. Seems like a really classy, nice guy. Really, and happy to be a Dodger. They all get along, which is amazing. They all go to each other's kids' birthday parties, which they didn't do in the old days. They all hang out with the families, and they go to Mookie Betts bowling tournaments. And what they were doing in the old days, Marty. But I mean, it's a whole different thing, and I think it's tremendous. I mean, that's why they get along. They all like each other. Like the Miguel Rojas home run in the World Series, that's probably to me the biggest hit of the year. This guy's a 210 hitter, and he hits a home run and makes some great plays. And it's one of the greatest World Series I've ever seen, even though it's not the same. There's no hit and runs. They're not advancing the runner. A guy strikes out 200. Now, the think about this Ohtani guy, in my opinion, there's a lot of hype to that. And I'll tell you why. I think, this is me personally. The guy is a 278 lifetime hitter. Don't compare him to Babe Ruth and Ted Williams. And with a 278 lifetime batting average, Ted Williams didn't strike out 190 times a year. In other words, sure, is he a great player? Yeah. Can he hit the home run? Yeah. But I mean, he's not Jeter. I mean, your guy, Aaron Judge, to me, is the best player in baseball because he can hit home runs. I hope he improves his fielding a little bit. All around, what did he hit 340 last year, 330, and all those massive home runs. I mean, he's a great player.
He really is. He really is a great fielder too. If you saw him every day.
No, I'm sure.
But it's too late, guys, to change me into a Dodgers fan.
Yeah.
We're not going to try to do it. We'll just we'll see how that works.
Hey, Marty, are you writing? Did you say you're still writing books, aren't you?
No.
Oh, you retired.
I said I got nothing left to say. Although occasionally I'll have a magazine story in me.
Yeah.
And Bill White just won an award from the Baseball Hall of Fame. He's 92. He's a very close friend. And so I find myself writing some magazine pieces about my friend Bill White.
Oh,
he got
that's great.
Buck O'Neill Award for his multifaceted career in the game.
100%.
You've had some tremendous storylines that you've been able to be a part of, and your guests on you're a guest on several different shows. Talk a little bit about what keeps you busy now, if you don't mind, Marty. If you're not writing right now, but your history goes back, obviously, starting with the Yankees and your love and affinity for the game of baseball.
Well, I'm called upon to do interviews if they tend to be historic in nature, and I enjoy doing those, as I've enjoyed doing this one. But otherwise, it's a quiet life on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. The picture on the right there, that's Juliet Papa, reporter for WINS All News Radio in New York. And for the last 10 years, I've done opening day with her, just capturing the history and the flavor of opening day at Yankee Stadium. So that's a fun thing I look forward to.
Hey, Marty, what do you think of the new stadium compared to the old Yankee Stadium? What's your honest opinion?
Well, if you just look at the field, it's old Yankee Stadium. You know, it's true to the dimensions and it captures the history. The rest of it is like a grand amusement park, and you know, but you don't have to pay attention to that. It's all the concession stands and everything like that. But the game itself is still a beautiful game, and you look at it played on historic Yankee Stadium. It's a great feeling.
My son Joshua was there for his first time. I took some pictures from the time we got off the subway. The right field line, you know, the corner of the stadium, where right field and the outfield is where we get off the station, and going along the back and the banners and Monument Park and seeing the field for the first time. There's so much history, and for obvious reasons, with the numbers that are retired and Monument Park and then the game itself. So many people wear Yankee jerseys and hats and everything. It really is a event. It's a carnival. Almost every home game needs to be something like that. It's a little bit different than obviously what it was like when Mickey played, or maybe DiMaggio or Ruth. Your love for the game, for obvious reasons, started when you were just a little kid. What's the same now for you? Do you get an excitement when you go to the ballpark?
It starts on the subway where everybody's wearing their Yankee clothing and feeling in a good mood and anxious to get to the stadium. So that buoyant feeling of being a Yankees fan begins when you get on the subway.
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't change, right? The smell of the grass, the feeling of the sun on your skin, and getting to watch professional baseball, especially at that level, from the time you were a little kid, even though you started out as in Brooklyn, you became a Yankee fan, and you still are. Baseball has been very, as Chico Escuela would say, baseball has been very, very good to you, right, Marty?
Right. Although the cost of a beer at the game has gone up a little bit.
Yeah, you could bring a family of 4 in the 1950s when you were just a little weezer. Everyone gets hot dogs and all that. Parking, everything done for the price of what a 12-ounce Budweiser would be right now in Yankee Stadium. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Hey, Harper, you know what I want to say? The best thing I've heard in this time that we've talked to the Yankee guru is when I asked him, what's your biggest thrill if you had to say one thing? And he said, the people I have met. And boy, did that nail it for me. That nailed it. I've never heard that. And, you know, I was thinking, and Marty, you're part of the people I've met. And I am grateful for that. What a great thing to say, though. And it's really, I would have never met Marty Appel if it wasn't for baseball or Harper. You know, it's the people you meet. And that, what a great thing to say, though. Thank you for that.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's about the relationships, obviously, Marty, and they're so important. And just, you know, you meeting your idol, really one of the first days that you're there, and having him turn out to be somebody that you respect, you appreciated, and so many other things. It's not a perfect world, but boy, you sure get close to perfection a lot of times when you get to be around these guys. And again, thank you for writing 25 different stories about different folks, not all baseball, but exclusively specific stories about some people that have made a difference. And thank you for that. We really appreciate you going out of your way to articulate some of the finer points of people that are worthy of that. So thank you for your devotion to what not only your profession and your craft, but to be able to honor others in a way that really is selfless.
Great to be with you guys. We'll do it again.
Yeah. Okay, final thoughts from you before we go. Thank you for bringing Marty.
I'm just honored to have you on, Marty. It was a great. I loved every minute of it. And my favorite picture is the one of you and the Mick. But it was just
mine
great.
too.
It was great. It was great to see you, Marty. And I love you, and I'm so happy you're doing good. So
thank you. Take care, guys.
All right, we'll bring it on one more time. We want to say thanks to everybody for tuning in to 100 Yards of Football, and this has been the Sports Page with Bob Case. I want to thank you for tuning in, everybody, and I'm going to quickly get back to the original here. We want to thank you all for being a part of the show. Marty Appel, just a great interview, and there's so much more in you and your life that we didn't get a chance. We want to take you with us, if you don't mind, and come back on another occasion to talk a little bit about more of the business aspect of things that you were able to do. But in the meanwhile, this has been 100 Yards of Football, the Sports Page with Bob Case. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you like the show, please subscribe and tell a friend. We'd love to grow in a way that allows people to know a little bit more about guys like Marty and what Bob and his relationship has been able